Welcome, everyone. We are really happy to have you here at Tec de Monterrey, in Monterrey, Mexico. For those of you that this is the very first time that you visit our country, I hope that you're having a good stay and that you have a chance to get to know more about Mexico, about the city. First of all, I would like to thank Peter, Mike, Sandra, also Martin and Don, because all of them had also the responsibility of leading WUN when the meeting was planned here. And finally, we are here. As it was mentioned, this is a very special year for us. Next September, we will be turning 80 years old. We at Tec de Monterrey, we started in a small house with 300 students, and nowadays we have close to 70,000 students in 26 campuses all over Mexico. We are a private, non-profit, multi-campus university system, and I would say that throughout those 8 decades, there have been key aspects that have been a part of Tec de Monterrey. The same as many of you, that pursuit of excellence, innovation in education, entrepreneurship, internationalization, and close relationship with industry. All these things together, I would say that are a very, very special element of Tec de Monterrey. And just to give you a sense related to the innovation aspect, back in the early 60s, we started offering the first computing program in all Latin America. Back in the late 80s, the very first internet connection in all Latin America started here also at Tec de Monterrey. And more recently, now we have in distance learning, we have near holographic telepresence, immersive experiences that we've been experimenting. Definitely, internationalization has also been a key element throughout these 8 decades. Also, in late 50s, in early 50s, we sought our first accreditation, but it turned out that there were no accreditation bodies in Mexico, so we look at other accreditation bodies in other parts of the world. So in the early 50s, we got accredited by a US accreditation body. We were the very first university outside of the US to obtain this type of accreditation. Nowadays, we have more international accreditations. And also, every year, we take a snapshot. Right now, we will find that there are 7,000 students of Tec de Monterrey abroad in different universities. 6 out of 10 students of Tec de Monterrey graduate with an international experience. But related to internationalization, I would say that the thing that we are most proud of is actually the networks that we belong to, because we think that these networks is an opportunity to create value and to add value, and in a collaborative way. I was thinking yesterday that somehow we have representation from different continents, and I was thinking about another event that gathers people from different continents, and of course it came to my mind the Olympics. But the Olympics, it's a competition. Here, I would say, well, we universities, we also compete. We compete for talent, we compete for resources. But this gathering is not about competition. This gathering is about cooperation. So it turns out that even though we compete for talent and resources, at the end of the day, when we have that talent and we have those resources, now we have to act. Now we want to have impact. And WUN, it's a great opportunity, a great platform for this impact. So thank you very much to WUN for choosing Tec de Monterrey. We really hope that this will be a very engaging meeting, a great opportunity to connect all of us, and also a great opportunity to look forward to the future of WUN. And without further ado, I would say that in the Olympics, they say, let the games begin. Here, let the conversations begin. Thank you very much.
This morning's session is designed to bring you up to date on the progress of projects, research projects and special projects that WN has supported over the last few years. These are either recently completed or still in progress, and they illustrate the range of the activities that the research activities that WN supports. We'll hear about 8 projects, some of which will be presented in person, others virtually. The first of these is a report on the development of an instrument to assess students' mental health in a multicultural context. This started in 2019 following a discussion among the partnership board members about that was much concerned with the state of students' mental health. And as a consequence of that discussion, WN established a working group to look into what might be done collectively to discern the nature of the problem, how widespread it was, and how cooperation among members might lead to some progress in addressing it. So the working group was formed from 14 interested member universities in 2019, late 2019. But of course, its work was derailed by the pandemic because many of those involved in the working group were heavily preoccupied in dealing with challenges students were having. The group resumed its activities in late 2021 and was able to make substantial progress since then. And today, we're going to have a report from its 2 co-chairs, Ralph Manchester from the University of Rochester. Ralph is Vice Provost and Director of the University Health Service. And Memory Mutariki, who's from University of Cape Town, who is the Director of the University Wellness Service and a medical doctor in the university. So Ralph and Memory will discuss the background to the design of and implementation of the instrument that the group has been working on. And I'd like to invite Ralph and Memory to take you from here.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today in Monterrey and present the work that, as Peter said, has encountered some obstacles along the way, but has been supported by the member institutions and the WUN staff. So, can everyone see the slides? I can. Okay. Good. So, as Peter mentioned, university student mental health is widely acknowledged to be a significant and growing problem around the world. The COVID pandemic only made things worse. Yet we have very limited data comparing students from multiple countries over time due to limited funding for data collection, language and cultural barriers among countries, and uncertainty about how to best intervene. So we do have one major study that we referred to as we were planning what this working group should do, and that was conducted by the World Health Organization, their mental health surveys, International College Student Project. This was an online survey of first-year students at 19 colleges, universities across 8 countries between 2014 and 2017. The countries that participated are listed there on the slide. And the questionnaire covered questions about 6 common mental health disorders: depression, mania and hypomania, generalized anxiety disorder, as well as panic disorder, alcohol abuse, and substance abuse disorders. About 14,000 students participated, overall a 45% response rate. However, the response rate among countries varied from 7% to 79%. and overall showed a 31% 12-month prevalence of mental health disorders. However, again, there was variation among the countries, ranging from 19% to 43%. The median age of onset of these mental health disorders in the students from all the participating countries was around 14. So these were not problems that started in college. They were problems that typically start in the adolescent years and continue to be present when students go off to university. And the most common disorders were depression and generalized anxiety disorder, both around 17, 18%. And the other disorders that were included in the survey were each present in fewer than 7% of students who participated. The data did show some correlates of mental health disorders. The following items roughly increase the likelihood of having a problem by maybe 50%. Female gender, students who were older age, although again, these were first-year university students, so it wasn't that big an age range. Having unmarried or deceased parents, having no religious affiliation, any non-heterosexual identification, and having extrinsic motivation. However, most of the affected students had none of these risk factors, so they didn't turn out to be all that useful in a clinical or actually on-campus public health sense. Again, this was a one-time survey. We have some limited data on a longitudinal basis from the American College Health Association's National College Health Assessment. This was first used in 2000 in the United States. However, it underwent a major change in 2008. It's administered mostly online, but a paper version does exist. It asks about a variety of health concerns, not just mental health concerns. Over 1 million students have participated in this survey since the major revision in 2008, and it gets international mention because 77,000 Canadian students participated in 2013 and 2016. The online response rates have been pretty much below 20%, and it's mostly undergrads, although some schools surveyed graduate students as well. So this shows a summary over the last 12, 13 plus years of data from 3 of the categories. And it's not good news. You can see comparing the 2009 to 2022 data that the percentage of students who report their overall health as being very good or excellent has decreased from 60% to just under 50%. And again, these are supposedly young, healthy adults. The percentage of students who report that a healthcare professional has told them they have a diagnosis of depression has increased from 10% to over 25%. And you can see the big jump there from 2018 to 2022 as the pandemic transpired. Even worse with the percentage of students who've been told they have a diagnosis of anxiety from around 10% to almost 33%. And even though the numbers are smaller, also a disturbing increase in the percentage of students who report having made a suicide attempt in the last year from about 1% to 2.5%. There have been a few other smaller studies, but those are the 2 large data sets that we had to take a look at as we started this project. However, it's obvious that there are some known unknowns here. We have no data from lower income countries. The World Health Organization study gathered data from countries with per capita GDP between $13,500 and $59,500 per year. Over 100 countries on the planet have lower per capita GDP, including some that are members of WUN, Ghana, and Kenya. The WHO study did not include any Asian, South American, or Arabic-speaking countries, and those are obviously important parts of the world of higher education globally. And very importantly, there aren't systematic data from students at the second year of university or above. So the working group discussed the data that were available and chose 3 priority areas for the work that we are undertaking. We want to include the upper class undergraduate students and graduate students as important targets of the survey. And I understand that in some countries, what I call graduate students are called postgraduate students, but that's as long as we understand the group we're talking about. We want to include students in lower income countries, and we want to include students in non-Western countries. And obviously, we want to take advantage of WUN's international membership to analyze differences among countries, which may give us information that will be helpful in identifying better ways for us to identify students at risk and intervene with them to help them complete their education and be successful afterwards. In order to do this, we had a number of Zoom meetings, brief pause during the peak of the pandemic early on. We have participation by approximately 10 WUN institutions on an ongoing basis. We decided early on that in order to make this easily doable, we would primarily rely on pre-tested survey questionnaires. For example, the PHQ-9 is widely used as a depression screening tool. Similarly, the GAD-7 for anxiety and the audit survey for alcohol use. And also, to make it easier, they are available already translated into other languages, and that will save significant work as we roll this out. We had input from a psychometric expert on the faculty at the University of Rochester. We had multiple discussions about balancing how to make this a comprehensive survey with how to make it feasible to actually administer around the world in multiple languages on campuses that have varying levels of resources. And based on all those discussions, and quite frankly, I mean, we had to make some decisions, which some people would call compromises. We then came up with a survey instrument that we were able to run a pilot project with, and Memory's going to tell you about that.
Thank you. Good morning. So I will be reporting on the pilot project of the working group that was conducted at the University of Cape Town. And the pilot project's purpose was really to check if the instrument that has been described by my colleague from the working group was able to provide us with the data that would give insight onto the mental health status of students across the network. The aim of the pilot, therefore, was to assess the mental health of students at the University of Cape Town and to establish their preferences for counseling options. The study was conducted as a qualitative cross-sectional self-administrative survey which was posted to all students of the university. Data was collected over 3 months of 2021. It was in the height of the pandemic, so perhaps some of the results would show the type of mental health status thereof. And the survey was open to all students, graduate and undergraduate students. And in terms of the survey tool itself, it consisted of a set of demographic questions initially, and then the validated tools that were described also, the PHQ 9. And for the UCT pilot project, we removed the last question of the patient health questionnaire 9 because of the suicidality and potential trigger of that one question during the time when students were also in remote learning. So it will remain one question that will have the option between the participating schools to remove the last question or to include that question in the survey. The general anxiety disorder questions were adapted just to suit the student work type of activities, and however all of the questions were included, and the first 3 questions of the audit C for alcohol use disorders was also adapted, and all of the questions were used. Only 3 of the first questions of audit 3 were included. Then, of course, there were the additional questions that we put together, which also explored the preferred method for accessing treatment by students. So going straight into some of the results, the survey was answered by 850 students, and of those, 87% were aged between 18 and 25 years of age, and 79% of the students were undergraduates, and 68% were female, and 48% were Black African, while 27% were white students, and 66% were heterosexual straight. So firstly, we looked at emotional well-being, and some of the key findings were that up to 41% of the respondents reported strong concerns about their emotional well-being with problems in the previous 12 months, and nearly 30% had moderate concerns. Only 4% of the respondents did not have any concerns on their emotional well-being. So then we moved further and looked at depressive disorder. 47% of the respondents displayed symptoms associated with major depressive disorder, and another 29% of these displayed severe depressive symptoms. And then we looked at the severity of anxiety, risk of alcoholism, and impact of emotion. Key findings here were that 35% reported severe levels of anxiety, 89% reported low risk of developing alcoholism, and more significantly, up to 45% of the students indicating that their emotions impacted their academic coursework. After that, we looked at the counseling options and started with online counseling. And the main findings were that 33% of students are completely comfortable with online counseling, and 36% were moderately comfortable, while only 2% were completely uncomfortable with online counseling as a modality of treatment. Then we looked at the different options that we classified into 3 categories: individual counseling as one, group counseling, and also counseling courses. And for group individual counseling, the options there were in-person counseling, audio only, or hotline telephonic counseling modality, or digital with or without audio. And for group counseling, we considered the option of in-person and online counseling. And for counseling courses, we also considered in-person and also self-help books and also online counseling as options. And our main findings here were that students were find all the different options acceptable. And however, when it comes to the individual and group counseling, the in-person mode is still the most preferred. Then some of our observations included the response rate of 3.2%, which we found to be within the range of other similar surveys. For example, a national study that was conducted by the South African Medical Research Council in 17 universities had a similar response rate of 3.5, and also other surveys by the WHO, the World Mental Health Surveys, where students were sent one email requesting participation, had similar responses. So as a working group, we discussed a few ways in which we could obtain a higher response rate for the actual rollout of the survey that included the timing of the survey within the schools that is standardized, as well as keeping the survey as short, under 8 to 10 minutes. And also there was a lack of diagnostic criteria because we relied on subjective data. So you would find that some of our findings are significantly higher than some of the findings that were earlier presented. And so that would be the reason that in those studies they did meet a diagnostic criteria. Then, of course, we had lack of weighting for some of the aspects, but we had no intention to do those because this is only a pilot study. However, for the actual rollout, those would be considered. So overall, our pilot survey indicates that there is a need for further exploring students' treatment preferences for mental health in universities. And our findings do show that students are suffering from mental health, and there is impact on their academic coursework and other aspects of their lives. Therefore, interventions which match students' preferences will be more effective in supporting their academic journey. And despite the technological advances and advances in telemedicine, and notwithstanding the fact that all participants were exposed to online learning, many of the participants still preferred in-person when it comes to mental health counseling. Secondly, there is a need to provide data-driven recommendations for university mental health services. And so the implementation of our phase 2 of the project by the working group will be the start of collecting comparable data across universities in the network. And we hope that collaborative efforts from the projects will be targeted at strengthening the capacity of student mental health services and finding ways to include digital technologies to complement the current traditional individual one-on-one options, and also to encourage the implementation of innovative public health approaches according to student preferences. At this stage, I will hand over back to my colleague to describe the next steps for our project. Thank you.
It was really outstanding work to be able to pull that off in the midst of the pandemic. We had originally talked about the pilot being done at more than one school, and Memory alone was able to make it happen. So we're very grateful for that. So our next steps are the working group has been discussing how to roll this out to schools in the academic year that, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, is going to start in a couple of months. In order to do that, we have identified a biostatistics consultant to help us determine sample size and some of the weighting characteristics that Memory referred to, which will be an important aspect of being able to generate data that is broadly applicable. We will be obtaining ethics approval at the various universities where the phase 2 survey will be administered. And we have agreed on administering the survey in the middle of the first semester of the coming academic year, since there is some reason to believe that surveying students, especially students new to a university in their first semester, may yield some results that would be different from in the second semester. So for consistency's sake, we're going to try to do it that way, at least for phase 2. We want to give special thanks to the universities that have been participating in this project. You can see them listed there for both phase 1 and now for phase 2. Actually, there may be a couple in the phase 2 list that were initially signed on and now are going to wait a bit, but this has been a highly collaborative effort, and we greatly appreciate everyone's work on this. And obviously, we want to thank the WUN leadership and staff for all of your support. Setting up Zoom meetings for people in multiple time zones is not the easiest thing in the world to do, but we've been able to do that with the support of the staff. So at this point, we'd like to, I think, open it up for questions. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm Bethany Lodge, the US Nurse at the University of Bristol. It's great to see that we participated in phase 1. Mary, when you got those results, what did you do with them? And when you got those results, which are obviously very concerning but match the broader trend, what did you make any, were you able to make any interventions or make any changes because of the data that you collected?
Thank you for the question. We definitely looked at the results together with our executive. Our Deputy Vice Chancellor is here with us this morning, and it was discussed at high level, and additional funding was requested through the forum, which enabled us to start looking at health promotion practices and also mental health awareness that would encourage students to start seeking help earlier than later. And we also are working with our teaching and learning department to come up with various ways of supporting the academic courses, because it came quite strongly that their mental health status did affect their academics. So sometimes the problem is visible on the academic side, but they actually require both mental health treatment as well as additional support for the actual academics. So we anticipated that because of the height of the COVID-19 pandemic at the time we conducted the survey, some of the impact of the pandemic itself was part of why the mental health status was where it was. And it would be interesting as we participate in phase 2 to see now that in the post-pandemic era what the picture would look like, but continue the education and health promotion practices that we have now initiated. Thank you.
Hi. I was a little bit worried about the low response rate of the pilot phase, not because of statistical power, but because of the risk of bias. Are you addressing this in phase 2?
So we discussed a few ways looking at it. There are difficulties currently because there is survey fatigue in most universities due to it being the easier way to conduct research. And we considered other ways such as incentivizing participants, which we found that would distort the findings. We would rather have no incentives, but looking at the timing of when the survey would be rolled. So we identified the first semester as described by my colleague, when students are still not yet too busy for the exams, because our timing, if I look at the exact dates of the pilot at UCT, that was in the second semester, and it was the 3 months of which the following month was the end of year exam, which students find very stressful. So it might have contributed to the pickup rate. And also what we then, at the end of the pilot, we looked at some of the questions that looked a little bit difficult for students to decide how to respond, and we modified them based on students' input so that the survey remains short and also much more clearer, so a few more students might be interested in responding. So we are hoping that between that would assist us obtain a higher response rate throughout.
Yeah, that's one of the things we'll be talking with our biostatistics consultant about, and I think we will certainly be looking at doing a randomized stratified sample of students rather than sending it out to whoever wants to click, and sending out reminders, and as Memory said, the question of incentives is a trade-off. There's the risk of that only appealing to students who are more interested in improving their financial status. However, if based on our biostatistics consultants' input, we need to do something to increase response rate in that demographic subgroup, then at least some schools may be able to take a look at that as well.
Thank you. Mike?
I realize I'm asking you to speculate here a little bit, but I'd be interested in your experience. So is the numbers that we're seeing after the pandemic the new baseline, or do you see any early signs of recovery?
So currently we anticipate that this is a baseline that may continue to be in this state for the next few years. Just looking at the fact that students at that time had already experienced problems as way back as 12 months. So it was not just related to that one part of the pandemic or the timing of the academic cycle that they were in. And so we are looking forward to the second phase to kind of give a bigger picture. And then also, that will be the baseline. We expect to have data continuously that we can look across a period of time to see what's happening and whether the implementation is resulting in a change.
Yeah, we certainly didn't see any indication that things are getting better during this academic year that just ended for us. And when I think about the cohort of individuals who went through at least part of adolescence during the pandemic, it's going to take, another 6-7+ years before they are through even undergraduate higher education never mind continuing on as graduate students. So I agree with Memory. This is, I think, probably our new baseline. I just hope it doesn't continue to get worse from here.
Thank you. Is this a snapshot study, the one in UCT, or did you capture the identification of the students so that it can then become longitudinal? Because obviously you did have a longitudinal one, then that would allow you to track over time whether things had actually got better or worse for that particular sample of students.
Because it was a pilot study, we only conducted it as a cross-sectional study the one time, and it was anonymous and self-administered. So it just gave the picture without identification.
Yeah, the working group discussed that, and at least for phase 2, it's going to be the same way it was done in the pilot study. Ideally, over the long term, we could generate some, I think, very useful data by following a cohort through, and maybe that's phase 3.
Can you say a little bit about the special attributes of the UCT study related to online counselling? Because it's, as everybody who's dealing with this knows, the provision of counselling is immensely expensive, and universities will be very interested in whether or not online counselling can save them money. Can you say a little bit about how it works and whether it can save universities money?
Most certainly. So we have observed in our clinical setting that we have a lot more students being able of attending their appointments without cancelling or modifying, because it's logistically easier for them to attend. And I think our pilot indicated that despite that their main preference would be an in-person, they find all of the other online and different options acceptable. So we have also observed that when our therapists are being able to conduct virtually, they are able to see a few more patients than they would in person, where there is logistics, where others arrive a little later, and sometimes the students are not even able to arrive on their intended slot, and therefore as much as there is an increase in demand, there are slots that are actually not taken. And we have also observed that every year we increase the capacity of the staff that are providing the service, but in turn the demand also just increases, so it almost looks like remaining the same despite the efforts of adding. And a study by one of the universities also in Cape Town at Stellenbosch found that if they required the number of staff that would meet the demand for their students, and this is a university smaller than the University of Cape Town, they would need up to 175 psychologists to do therapy if they were to have enough people to meet that demand, meaning for UCT that would require even more than that number, and there is no way that could be affordable for any institution. And so all of these other methods like digital e-health modalities to try and assist with health promotion as well as the therapy itself would be a way cheaper way to include telephonic as well, where students are able to call randomly as hotlines that we are currently using. We see a greater uptake after the COVID-19 pandemic than it was before for the telephonic options. So I think the pandemic also brought in new ways of seeing things from the students' perspectives and acceptability of all of the different options. So we see that as a way to reduce costs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, as Memory said, we have more options we can take a look at now. It depends on exactly who is delivering that telecounseling service, because if it's the staff of the counseling center, then that's basically the same cost whether they're seeing the student in their office or remotely. If the university is hiring an outside organization that has counselors working probably from home or maybe from their office, spread all across the country or all across multiple countries, then it depends on the economics of that particular kind of service delivery plan. We have been engaged with one of the companies that does that at the,
Rochester.
at the University of
Yeah.
Rochester. And that has provided more flexibility in when students can access counseling, because they do have counselors in multiple time zones. So if the student decides they need to talk to someone at 2 o'clock in the morning, that is an option. I mean, it's an option with our counseling center staff too, because we have someone on call, but it's not like they're going to get an hour therapy session at 2 o'clock in the morning. And another advantage is that they have counselors who can do counseling in multiple languages. And right now, we are limited to English and Mandarin within the counseling center at the University of Rochester. So I'm not sure it's going to be all that much less expensive, but it will expand the range of options.
Thank you. Neoprene, and then Sue. Oh, Sue first.
Should I go here?
Yeah.
The wrong thing. Okay. So Sue Harrison from the University of Cape Town. I think it might be worth saying that obviously seeing these numbers, when your own numbers come in, it does have an impact on you, which I think is good to see, because I suspect all our numbers are actually quite harsh. And as Memory said, it means that we think about this from the academic point of view, and it's talked about quite holistically in academic programs and with students, not only in a counseling session. And I think bringing the acceptability of accepting that many students struggle with things and then finding ways of working through them even before you get into the counseling services then becomes really, really important. But it's very central in UCT now, both in terms of how we offer the counseling, which Memory's spoken to quite a lot, but also in thinking through what the triggers of this kind of response is within an academic environment, particularly as currently we have many first and family students, and how one can then try and ease that space so that the anxieties don't build up to the same degree.
Okay, I have two questions. In phase 2, are you going to address the issue about the health service at the university level, apart from collecting data from students? Because I think as a university administrator, we definitely would like to know how each university has managed to, well, provide some intervention for these mental health issues. That's the first question. The second one is about confidentiality. Do you actually discuss anything about that? Because in our university, at Mahidol University at one time, I think the vice president who is taking care of this mental health issue is having problems whether when we detect these issues happening to our students, whether or not we should be notifying the parents, or what do we actually do correctly in addressing this issue? So 2 questions, thank you.
I can respond to the first question at least. I think that's an excellent suggestion to collect data on how mental health services are delivered at each of the participating universities. And I think we can pretty easily add that in. Obviously, we don't have to ask all the students how the services are delivered. We'll just collect that from the contact person at each university. And do you want to respond to the second?
And thank you for the question on confidentiality. So we agreed as a working group that every school would follow the ethical processes at their school in obtaining ethics that would also detail the level of confidentiality. So for the pilot, the WUN identified a survey platform, the Cervicate, which we were able to send out as a link to all students, so there was no identification, and the Cervicate platform collects the data as statistics, so there are no identification markers of the students participating, only the data that they have put into that system. So we have created and shared the templates that we used for obtaining the ethics in the pilot that the different schools may utilize to modify according to the needs thereof, so that we all have more or less what looks almost standardized in terms of the ethics around maintaining privacy and confidentiality of participants.
Yeah, the members of the, or representatives of the schools involved in phase 2 have not identified any problems with needing to do parental notification about a student who's indicating a high level of distress. Obviously, that's going to depend on the local laws and regulations, but certainly at the University of Rochester, that is not something that is going to interfere with us administering the survey.
Oh yes, and to add, in our setting, the age of majority being 18 years old, most of our students are 18 and above and do not require that information being shared with parental. And so for the survey, the age ranges that we put on the survey started at 18 and different categories, so that those who were less than 18 for any reason would not really be included.
Manchong from Mahidol University. I have two questions. First one, do you have any enough information to differentiate between the problem occurred in foreign students compared to domestic? And another one is from different discipline. Let's say students studying engineer compared to other professionals like medical medicine or other faculties.
Yes, we are collecting a demographic variable about the student's country of citizenship. So we will be able to analyze international students from domestic students at each of the participating schools. We will be talking with our biostatistics consultant about how big a sample size we would need to get in order to distinguish between different areas of study. I am a little pessimistic that we're going to be able to actually get that large a response rate and do the targeted surveying that would get enough responses given the variability in the different sizes of the various areas of study, number of students studying. So that's a possibility. Our main targets are to look at gender and undergraduate versus graduate, race, and domestic versus international status.
There is this conversation, and actually some companies already existing related to AI for mental health. And with the problem growing so fast, and the World Health Organization estimates that mental health represents like 4% of the GDP, and it might be growing. And there are already some global organizations and even governments considering this, and there are even some FDA approved. My question is, as part of the study, are you considering to see who is using these, and what are your thoughts or your early thinking about this?
When we put together the instrument, the discussions on AI were not exactly where they are at the moment, but we've started discussing, and we haven't seen any research at the moment that has shown how effective these are going to be. And we also see a future role within mental health education and promotion, but we are yet to discover what would be the role in treatment, which seems to still require some level of intervention in diagnosing and treating. So we will await any studies, and perhaps at a certain phase that would be something we can consider as part of our options, asking options around mental health once we are certain.
Thank you, Ralph and Memory, for a very nice presentation. This is Rocky Tuan from Chinese University of Hong Kong. Obviously, one of the biggest variable during this last few years is the pandemic, which is, we certainly didn't know anything about it and still probably don't know everything about it. But the point is, in your survey, I understand we're looking at the mental health of the students, but it would be very nice to also isolate or maybe clarify the role of the pandemic, which of course is associated with anxiety about getting infected and lockdown and not being able to do face-to-face instruction, education, losing all your friends, out of contact, and whatever. So I'm just wondering, in your phase 2, which is now either during the pandemic or post-pandemic, how do you factor this out? And I saw the trend that you presented, Memory, some of them which are very alarming, obviously. Now the pandemic hopefully is behind us, or most of it will be behind us. And then how do you take that number and then, I'm not trying to factor it out, but somehow clarify the relationship. Now, one of the things we saw on our campus is that in terms of counseling during pandemic, you really need to have very small group or one-on-one counseling. That became very much needed. The group thing or the online, click here, click there, that doesn't do a whole lot. The anxiety level is so high, very worrisome. Now, things have calmed down a bit. So I'm just wondering, in your survey, any way you can, I guess at the end of the day, factor out what's the most important parameter that we should pay attention to, and then which will then lead to, how we design our counseling service, which is very, very important these days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in our setting, we found the anxiety levels being very high, severe anxiety, and the timing being closer to exams, and also in the height of the pandemic, and students expressing how their emotional state affected their coursework directly. So for us, I think there was at that time a multiple number of factors, some of them that came from the struggles of actual remote learning. We had students who struggled just with how to learn remotely, and of course some of the factors that you mentioned, isolations, restrictions, and being in certain environment in the home that is not conducive to actually being able to study. So all of those, we did not really use questions that could take exactly what each of the participants felt, but this is the observation. The observation during that time at UCT in general, in terms of the demand for services, we found that it was highest than it has ever been during the 3 years of the pandemic, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So we found that the demand tripled to what the statistics were before that, and I think the COVID pandemic can be attributed attributed to the very erratic rise that is beyond what we had observed. Unfortunately, it has not decreased even where we are at the moment. So it's tripled, and it's there, and it remains there. So perhaps until, as Ralph mentioned, a few years that it may take to recover from the impact of COVID.
Thank you. I think we have to close there. Thank you very much, Ralph and Memory, for a very worthwhile presentation.
Thank you.
So we move on to our second report, and this is on innovating the mathematics curriculum in times of change. This report will be virtual from Alf Coles, Professor of Mathematics Education at the University of Bristol. Alf led a team of researchers where his collaborators were from Alberta, UCT, and CUHK. Over to you, Ralph.
Thank you very much, everybody. And good morning or good afternoon from England. I'm very sorry I couldn't be there with you, and thank you for this opportunity to share this work. As has been mentioned, I was one of the leads on this study with Kate LaRue from the University of Cape Town, and the 4 WUN linked universities are there. There were several other universities we were working with as well. But I think to give you a flavor of what went on, the simplest way is we have a short video that lasts about a couple of minutes that hopefully can play now, which gives you a flavor of what this network is about. So I hope the video can start.
Is inequitable access to quality mathematics learning.
Well, we wanted to start supporting curriculum innovation, and we wanted to start thinking about processes by which that innovation could happen.
I would like to make mathematics learning much more relevant.
Mathematics can be a tool for empowering people and children and communities.
Problems that we are dealing with and addressing in the real world can actually be integrated into our learning of mathematics.
You might start with a visible, living, felt issue. And part of the work of the project actually has been trying to support teachers and teachers in training into thinking about how the curriculum might interweave with that problem.
We are doing strict and rigorous research, but oriented for helping the communities.
There's a sense that this is a time now where we need to do some of this innovation.
We've done a working group at the Psychology of Mathematics Education Conference, which extended the conversation beyond our group, which has been great.
We have also started some writing of research papers for journals.
I think from this project we've really realized how we have to work across those traditional academic boundaries.
We would like now to bid for some money to really try and implement change more systematically and investigate the effects of that change. Great. So I hope that's given you some flavor of what went on. This network involved a number of individual projects taking place in the host institutions, as well as these collaborative meetings that happened across them. There were particularly successful projects in Mexico, South Africa, and Bristol, and we have bid for some of that extra money that was being mentioned. So in Mexico, for instance, the work has led to a project funded by the Global Challenges Research Fund, which is one of the big UK funds. And that's actually extended. The network was originally conceived about innovating the curriculum in higher education. And through the course of our work, and with this Mexico work, it's extended into work in schools. The South Africa and Bristol project, we bid for European Research Council money. We were actually unsuccessful last year, but we were very highly rated and will be bidding again. One of the things that has happened as well over the course of this time is really recognizing the role that mathematics has to play in thinking about the pressing ecological challenges of our time. Mathematics is involved in predicting, in modeling, and communicating climate change and other issues. And yet none of that currently is in the curriculum in most countries. There are some moves towards involving some mathematical modeling in some countries, but these are really very much on the margins in general. And we've recognized really how important that is. We were quite heavily disrupted by COVID, so there were a number of bilateral visits that we hoped would take place, which weren't able to. But our monthly meetings continued. We'd actually planned for those to happen on Zoom before COVID happened. And one of the things I'd really point to is the important conceptual work that took place through those meetings, and perhaps partly actually as a result of not being able to do some of the more physical meetings. So one of the things we recognized was that in our work and looking at work of many colleagues in the social sciences, we've tended to take the environment or ecology as a fixed background to our concerns. So in mathematics education, for instance, there's a lot of work looking at language in classrooms. We've tended to do that without stopping to think about the quality of the air children are breathing in order to speak that language. And so one idea that emerged out of this network was the pressing need we felt to think about socio-political and ecological concerns together. And so we started talking about a socio-ecological mathematics education. And with that phrase, several partnerships within the network are continuing to flourish. Some of the things we're most proud about having done is around our engagement with the International Commission on Mathematical Instruction. So this is the global body of mathematics education that has reach across the whole world. And we began engaging with them through our network, with the network team, and convinced them to hold a one-day symposium on mathematics education and the socio-ecological. This was run by myself and Kate LaRue from UCT. 170 scholars from around the world came to that. There were 50 presentations, all looking at different ways of thinking about how the mathematics curriculum might be relevant to community concerns, might link in with ecological issues happening in their area and elsewhere. As a result of the success of that symposium, ICME, which is the acronym for this organization, have agreed, and this hasn't actually been officially announced yet. But I'm able to say that they have agreed a study conference on mathematics education and the socio-ecological. These conferences are really a big deal within mathematics education. So they involve scholars getting together to try and gather the state of the art in a discipline, in a sort of sub-discipline. So there's a study conference, and that results then in an open access book published by Springer. And these books are some of the most highly cited books within our field. So this is really a kind of really an extraordinary opportunity to try and get scholars from across the world engaging in these questions which we feel are so pressing and important. One of the other things, Armando in the little clip mentioned the writing we were doing. And so one thing that was published in 2022 was a special issue, the title, pretty much the title of our WUN project, and with guest editors involving the team. 3 of those guest editors had not been involved in editing before, and I know at least one has gone on to guest edit their own special issue since then. So a number of the bits of writing in this special issue were from our WUN network. So it's been an incredibly significant and generative time that is very much ongoing. And I want to just end with a few reflections on the WUN organization itself. And I just want to reflect, for me, on really how unique an experience it's been working with the UN compared to other funding bodies. And part of that is just having faces to names, not engaging with mailboxes, and feeling that there's a sense of engaging with engaged and informed people who are able to make decisions. So we were particularly grateful of being able to have these no-cost extensions to our project, which allowed the work to continue. We were also particularly grateful in the flexibility around the budget, which was needed as a result of COVID. And as I mentioned, for me, although the amounts of money are small, it's really the deep intellectual exploration that has been most significant. And ICBE will, I'm sure, not have accepted our proposals without that conceptual clarity. And just a final word, really, that for me personally, the grant's been quite transformative. I was promoted to professor in the course of this grant, and I'm sure that wouldn't have happened without it. Again, although the funds are small, these are highly valued grants within our institution. And for me, the ideas of the socio-ecological are really the ideas that I'm convinced I'll be researching for the rest of my career. I really feel that this has been about generating what will become the rest of my life's work. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing this project, and I hope you'll keep in touch with developments that are to come.
Thank you, Alf. We'll move now to another virtual presentation. This is a report from a special interest group on sustainable development goals in Asia. This group, started by researchers at NCKU, was formed to study and promote best practices related to the sustainable development goals, particularly SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, and SDG 7 on affordable and clean energy. Beyond NCKU, the project has active partner researchers from Auckland, from Bristol, from CUHK, from Leeds, and from Makerere University. And we'll hear a summary of the group's work from two researchers at NCKU, Professor Serfu Lin and Professor Chung Ying Lin, and also from researcher at Makerere University, Professor Josephine Este. They're on a recorded video, so we'll move to that now.
I'm very happy to introduce you the Global Research Group SDG in Asia. This group is chaired by National Cheng Kung University, NCKU, and supported by the WUN. Our focus is on sustainable development goals and relevant issues in Asia. This group supports different kind of support and resources to the researchers coming from different regions. We welcome PI from different institutions, and we may support the fund directly go to the PI and their institution. In the last 3 years, we have funded 26 projects with total funding of £130,000 financial support. We welcome multi-international teams to develop their own ways of collaboration. This WUN SDG group has been started since July 2021. So in the last 1.5 years, we have hosted the webinar and also international conferences, and also report the result in the WUN AGM meetings. So for this phase, we have funded 11 projects coming from 58 researchers from 20 institutions from 11 countries. In the second phase of the project, which is funded starting from earlier this year, we have found 15 projects coming from 31 institutions with 70 researchers from 17 countries. We welcome all of you to join this group.
This is C.Y. Lin, Chung Ying Lin, from the Institute of Allied Health Sciences, College of Medicine, National Cheng Kung University. And my background, I'm a registered occupational therapist. And my projects are doing about something on people's mental health, psychological distress. And I especially emphasize this because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that COVID-19 pandemic has changed the people's life and people's mental health. However, we need more information on this part, especially cross-country comparisons. So my project focus on different countries' reaction towards the pandemic and how people have developed different kinds of behaviors, such as the protection behaviors or the addictive behaviors. There are two major points in my project. The first is that whether people have different protection behaviors because of COVID-19 and whether these protective behaviors are associated with their mental health, their psychological distress. And another point is that I want to know whether the pandemic increased people's addictive behaviors. For example, like the gaming behaviors, like the social media use, or the smartphone use. We know that the pandemic caused a lot of chaos to our, administration, and students, they need to use the smartphone or use the virtual online methods to keep learning. In this regard, it is assumed that they may have addicted to this kind of technologies and develop their addictive behaviors. However, it is still under development, and we need to know more about this during the pandemic. So I focus on these two parts, and then to know about this issue across countries. Thus, WH Asia helps me to do the country comparisons, especially focusing on the Asia countries like Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. And via the comparisons, we know that different countries may have different issues regarding their psychological distress, their protective behaviors, and also their addictive behaviors. And I think this is timely because we need to know this information for governments or healthcare sectors to develop effective methods to help people, especially young adults, to have good mental health. Currently, we have several publications, and we find out some phenomena regarding the COVID-19 impacts. For the impacts on the protective behaviors and also the mental health, we compare Hong Kong people and Taiwan people regarding their protective behaviors. And we found that Hong Kong people, they adhere more than Taiwanese people to the protective behaviors. For example, they keep their ventilation more frequently than the Taiwanese people, and also they have adhered to more hand washing and mask wearing. In addition, they try to avoid gathering than the Taiwanese people. However, we also found that the gathering may not be the good thing to the mental health. So we think that although we need to be aware of the infection, the transition of the COVID-19, we still need to help people to cope with it, to know the importance of the social interaction. Regarding another study that we want to know about the addictive behaviors, the first thing is that we need to have some validated instruments. Currently, we know that the DSM-5 has defined the internet gaming disorder, and also the ICD-11 has defined the gaming disorder. DSM-5 defined the IGD, Internet Gaming Disorder, in 2013, and the ICD-11 defined the gaming disorder, GD, in 2020. They are very new definitions. So a lot of research, they are doing the questionnaire development. And we want to use these developed questionnaires to the Asia countries. When I conduct this study, there were almost no questionnaires validated across these Asia countries. So currently we are doing to do the questionnaire validation, translation. And now we have translate several instruments, including the gaming disorder test, internet gaming disorder short form scale, smartphone application-based addiction scale, and Burgeon social media scale. And we try to translate them into several languages, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thai, and also Mandarin Chinese. And then we try to validate their psychometric properties across these countries. I think the WN Asia group is very helpful for my projects. It helps me to make a wide connection to the international level. For example, when I want to conduct the comparison between Hong Kong and Taiwan people regarding their protective behaviors and psychological distress, I do not have any connection to a group in Hong Kong studying on this topic. Through the WN Asia, it helps me to reach out to the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and there are scholars there doing the similar topic. So we can discuss with each other and try to make the comparison. In addition to the connection, the WN Asia also provide me the financial support that I have some money. I can try to recruit participants, and I can also make use of the money to link up with the international partners. And then we can have some discussions, and we also can have some webinars or conferences together via using this money. So overall, I think the WN Asia provide a strong support to me. In addition, they also give me some chance to show my findings, show my results. And they have made some advertisements to report my finding on the comparison between Hong Kong and Taiwan people's protective behaviors and psychological distress.
Hello, greetings to you all. This is Dr. Josephine Saite from Uganda, the PI of the project titled Climate Change Education, the Role of Gender in Mitigation and Adaptation. This is a collaborative project between Makerere University in Uganda, National Cheng Kung University in Taiwan, and Universitas Airlangga in Indonesia. The focus of the project is integration of gender perspectives in teaching and learning about climate change, mitigation and adaptation, and we are specifically interested in analyzing primary textbooks, grades 4 to 7 for Uganda, 4 to 6 for Taiwan and Indonesia. This project is interesting and timely in the sense that we are all aware that climate change is one of the global challenges to attainment of Sustainable Development Goals. And incidentally, all the three nations, Uganda, Taiwan, and Indonesia, have in one way or the other suffered adverse effects of climate change. For example, excessive flooding. And at the same time, sometimes there is actually landslides. And we have also experienced increased incidences of pests and diseases, and all of these are attributed to climate change. And hence, this project is an opportunity for the three countries who are experiencing similar problems to collaboratively learn from each other and perhaps come up with better solutions. The achievement so far that we have is that we managed to refine the focus of our project to now actually analyze textbooks for gender integration at the primary level. I'm proud of having found colleagues from Taiwan and Indonesia with a similar interest to mine. And then we put together the concept and being awarded the project. That is actually for me a big achievement also. From the African context, we all know that actually gender is affected differently by climate change. In Uganda, for example, the girls drop out of school, go back to the community, and rely on environment for livelihoods. And as a nation, we are actually an agricultural country. And actually, the agriculture we practice is basically on weather. We depend on the weather. And once that there is a problem, then already the people who are contributing more to agriculture, which are actually women, to the tune of over 60% of agricultural labor is provided by women in Uganda. However, initiatives often address the effects of climate change all sort of gender. And for us, we think that looking into integration of gender perspectives in primary would be better, since if this has already been done, it would help the girls who actually drop out of school not before completing the cycle. Probably by that time, they would have got some gender perspectives, and then they would be able to appreciate that men and women or different people are affected in different ways as far as climate change is concerned. The usefulness of World University Network to this project is that it provided a platform for the 3 universities to come together and put up a concept and actually try to work around their own interests in terms of research. And we are hoping that we will be able to put up together a proposal and seek for funding, and that would actually strengthen the collaboration even more.
Should thank them remotely. So now time for a break. Refreshments are outside. Please be back at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you. Our next report, first after the break, is on a project to develop a low-cost, high-efficiency electric vehicle battery charger for emerging markets. And this was a project led by Jesus Valdez-Resendiz, who's an assistant professor here at Tech, and his partners in the project were researchers from Sheffield and Southampton. Jesus.
So hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Jesus Valdez. I'm assistant professor here at Tec de Monterrey in Power Electronics. So I'm very glad to be here. I hope you are really enjoying your time here in Monterrey. So one of the major concerns about electromobility in developing countries is the need for more infrastructure to satisfy the demand of electric energy and the associated cost to overcome the current power of the electric system. So this is also true in Mexico, so where there exist about 30,000 electric vehicles, but only 2,000 electric vehicle chargers. So this is a twofold problem. In one hand, more electric vehicle charger stations will be required in the near future, but on the other hand, we only also need a stronger electric network to provide affordable energy to those installations. So how can we transform this challenge into a plausible solution? Well, when you buy an electric car, you think about it as a financial liability. But what about if we could convert this into an asset? So let me explain myself. What if the battery in the electric car could be used to power not only the car, but also, well, anything? Vehicle-to-grid is the term that is used to name this technology that allows bidirectional power flow between the electric vehicle and the electric system. And it has the potential to completely transform the relationship between the cars and the electric network. The vehicle-to-grid permits that energy that is stored in the electric batteries can be fed back into the electric grid to supply energies and times of peak demand. The vehicle-to-grid permits that stored energy in the car can be fed back into the electric grid. So this is a two-way transfer that not only encourages a more active way to use energy, but also to open up new income streams for drivers, for fleet owners, and also for car manufacturers. So this two-way transfer works because the inherently low utilization rate of private vehicles. So we might drive our car from our home to work, but most of the time this big battery on wheels is just sitting there on the parking lot or on the street. So most people are not using all the potential of the battery. They are only using a fraction of their battery capacity, and that means that there is a huge amount of spare stored energy that could be providing services elsewhere, such as supporting the local energy distribution utilities or mitigating the intermittency of renewable energy systems. So imagine if you can make money from these services when your car is just sitting there doing nothing or parking in the street. So now what we used to call a charger is technically an EVCE. That stands for Electric Vehicle Service Equipment. The real charger is inside the electric power system of the vehicle and is called the onboard charger. So the only task of the EVSE is to supply the power to the onboard chargers in a safety way. So this is true for level 1 and level 2 chargers. Ideally, you will never use level 1 charger because it's so slow. So, but obviously it's better than walking. The better option is level 2 charger that is that use 220 volts. It is more powerful, and it gives around 50 kilometers of range per hour. DC chargers, which are sometimes erroneously called three-level chargers, are usually the road runners for the charging world, and they can provide energy directly to the high-power battery of the vehicle by passing the onboard charger of the car. Usually they are very high-power equipment, although they can also be found in the small packages of around 10 kilowatts. So vehicle-to-grid could be integrated in all three levels of chargers. However, level 1 and level 2 requires bidirectional onboard chargers, which are not very common in today's commercially available vehicles. So the most convenient integration at this time would be the DC charging stations or DC chargers, where bidirectional power converters can be implemented and directly supply or sink energy directly from the high power battery of the vehicle. So this is a general block diagram of a DC charger. The interconnection with the grid is made through an active front end in such a way that we can rectify the energy provided by the AC grid and just apply some power factor correction techniques. And then the power flows from the vehicle to the grid, and the converter works as a grid-tied converter, similar to the ones that are used in photovoltaic energy generation systems. So the charging station also require a bidirectional DC to DC converter that usually step up and regulates the rectified voltage from the grid to reach the required 500 to 800 volts to feed up the battery when the power flow is reversed from the vehicle to the battery. Then this same converter step down the voltage to a 400 DC bus to feed the inverter to inject back the energy from the vehicle to the electric grid. So obviously this power system operates thanks to the sophisticated control algorithm and communication protocols that enables the exchange of information between the charging station and the vehicle. In this project, we developed an integrated modular AC to DC converter with bidirectional capabilities, and it could be used in charging stations and allow the integration of vehicle-to-grid technology. So the main advantages of the proposed topology are the high voltage gain that it has to allow us to interconnect the electric grid with the high power and high voltage electric vehicle battery, and also the modularity to increase the power as desired by the application, and the low common mode noise that allows to have a smaller filter at the AC site. So we designed, implemented, and lab tested the converter with very good results that were later published. So this is the active front-end converter, and this is the integration of the active front-end and the DC to DC converter, and this is the complete solution of one module. So this can be scaled for a high-power DC charging system. So we also work on database control strategy for multiple stage of conversion, like is the case in a DC power and a DC battery charger. So with this strategy, we avoid the use of traditional controller design processes and go directly from the data to the controller implementation. So we have preliminary results about this and that have been published, and continue developing some ideas about this data-driven control. So thanks to the WUN support, we bought some electronic components for the prototypes and attend the Power Electronics and Motor Drive Conference in Newcastle in United Kingdom in June 2022, where we presented 7 articles. So this is Professor Jonathan Mayo from University of Sheffield presenting one of the articles, and this is me. All the 7 articles are available through the IEEE Explore database. So I take also advantage of that travel to stay for 2 weeks at the University of Sheffield and discuss some of the next steps of the plan of collaboration, also discuss some of the results that we got previously. So after that, we published also 2 journals articles with some preliminary results of the converter and the control strategies. This is one from that just was published this last week in the IEEE Access, and the other one was published in February this year about the direct control of a power converter, specifically for application in DC charging stations. So we are planning to continue with the collaboration on this and other topics. In this summer, I will be again at the University of Sheffield, this time supported by TEC de Monterrey, specifically Professor Ricardo Ramirez, who is the Associate Dean of Research. And well, finally, this is Professor Jonathan Mayo, Professor Julio César Rosas Caro. And well, we know that the effect of one electric vehicle providing energy into the grid, it could be negligible. But if millions of these mobile batteries could be deployed in an instant they will become the biggest future asset for the electric grid. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Our next report is a virtual presentation on establishing, on establishing the low carbon energy transition in a changing climate. And this project was led by Rob DeConto, who's Professor of Earth Geographic and Climate Sciences and Director of the School of Earth and Sustainability at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And he'll be joined by Matthew Lackner, who's Professor of Mechanical Engineering and Director of the Wind Energy Center at the University of Massachusetts. They led a project in which they were joined by partners in Bergen and Bristol. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Please go ahead. We're ready for you.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
We had no sound on the outside. Sorry. My name is Rob DeConto. I'm a climate scientist at the University of Massachusetts. I'll be presenting today on our WUN work. I'm partnering with my collaborating principal investigator, Matt Lackner. Matt is a professor of mechanical and industrial engineering. So our WUN project is to develop a network. This is about establishing the low carbon energy transition on the backdrop of a changing climate. So our project motivation comes from the fact that coastlines in particular, where sea level rise is happening and in many cases are prone to a higher frequency of extreme weather and climate events, are places that are becoming increasingly important in terms of our transition to renewables. So there are complex issues emerging. We need to transition quickly to renewables. We all know that. But you know, we're trying to do this in places that are increasingly vulnerable. There are also important socioeconomic issues at play that can sometimes lead to issues of inequality in this energy transition. The Caribbean region in particular provides a really interesting case study. We all know what happened to Puerto Rico in 2017 when it was impacted by Hurricane Maria. And here are just a few images of renewable energy infrastructure that was destroyed or heavily impacted by Maria. So the Caribbean is, in many cases, those small island states in the region are wanting to become more independent of having to ship in diesel fuel for energy production. There's a desire to shift toward renewables, and yet there is a projected increasing vulnerability to that very infrastructure. So these are really interesting compounding problems that are very, very complex. So our team was built in a very interdisciplinary way. We are climate scientists, oceanographers, biologists, energy engineers, energy economists, social scientists, people who study public policy, issues of migration, and experts on the built environment coming together to think about the complex interplay of energy transition and these emerging increasingly vulnerable places around the world, and what this means ultimately for energy equity. Locally at the University of Massachusetts, which unfortunately is no longer a part of the WUN network, but was for quite some time and showed some great success in working in the WUN framework. Internally at UMass, this was a cross-campus collaboration between an emerging School of Earth and Sustainability and a new UMass Energy Transition Institute. So I'm essentially representing the School of Earth and Sustainability in my work, and Matt is representing the Energy Transition Institute. Our WUN partners you see down on the bottom left bullet, University of Bergen, University of Bristol, University of Massachusetts, again, which is no longer a partner in the WUN, University of Sydney, and Zhejiang University in China. In addition to that, we had some other partners signed on, including the Grantham Institute at Imperial College of London and the University of the Virgin Islands, particularly because we have this focus right now on the Caribbean as a focal point for a case study. A lot of the work has not happened yet, and mainly because of the pandemic and travel restrictions. All of our work is going to culminate in the fall of this year, so we'll be able to actually provide an additional report on the outcomes, but we are planning on holding a workshop in September in St. Thomas. This is going to include our WUN partners, including, and this is exciting, I think, is we're going to bring local and regional stakeholders to the table at our meeting. Some of those folks are involved in local energy policy. We're going to have local students, as well as the students that are affiliated with the WUN partner universities and regional Caribbean academic institutions. There's going to be a 2-day meeting. It's going to include plenary lightning talks and breakout sessions. Students will be involved, and we're going to do a half-day field excursion to look at some of the vulnerable energy infrastructure. Another really nice aspect of this is that Matt and I are facilitating this to be a student-led and student-driven project. And the cohort of students belong to something called Elevate that now Matt is going to talk about, because this project Elevate that you're going to hear about is a major, we're very excited about this early outcome of our WUN project. So Professor Lackner, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great, thanks, Rob. Before I talk about Elevate, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the workshop that we're hosting and putting on in the Virgin Islands. The big picture goal is to develop a global interdisciplinary network of researchers tackling energy transition topics, in particular grounded by the needs of climate vulnerable communities. We chose to focus this workshop on energy transition in the Caribbean islands because of their heavy reliance on fossil fuels for electricity production and water desalination, and their increasing susceptibility to climate hazards like hurricanes. The workshop will have 3 main topics. First, to determine what energy infrastructure resilience looks like in the face of extreme weather events and chronic climate stressors. Second, to identify promising renewable energy technologies based on current resources and limitations to ensure long-term sustainability. And third, to understand how historical context, current policy, and community actions are impacting the energy transition with an eye towards identifying the most promising avenues for change. Rob, can you go to the next slide, please? Great, thanks. So sort of ironically, even before we put on our workshop, the WUN project has had a huge impact at UMass. In particular, there's just been an enormous growth in activities related to energy transition, climate change, and sustainability since the WUN project sort of catalyzed us around these ideas. In 2021, we received 2 NSF grants totaling over $4 million to establish an interdisciplinary graduate program on this topic called Elevate, which stands for Elevating Equity Values in the Transition of the Energy System. The motivation for Elevate is the need for the energy system to decarbonize rapidly to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And in our approach, we view it as a unique opportunity to reshape society towards one that is more equitable and sustainable. So far, Elevate has funded 15 graduate students across 10 departments. In the coming years, we plan to fund at least 15 more and potentially even more than that. These students are working interdisciplinary, trying to tackle all sorts of different problems related to energy transition, bringing in climate issues as well as socioeconomic impacts. And then more recently, UMass has formally established an Energy Transition Institute. We just hosted our second annual Energy Transition Symposium. So all in all, because of the award we got from the WUN, we've already massively increased the activity at our campus around these really important topics. Thank you.
Be happy to take any questions.
I'm afraid we don't have time for questions, but thank you both very much. Rob and Matthew, thank you for this very illuminating presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robbins.
So our next report is on a project that it was designed to better inform health resource allocation decisions by strengthening the connection between academic institutions and local policymakers. And this project is led by Paul Revel, who's professor and co-director of the Global Health Team at the University of York. This project was a partnership with the University of Bergen. Paul is joining us virtually. Thank you. Oh, we're having a connection. Well, okay.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, indeed. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the event organisers for the invitation to speak. So as the chair mentioned, this was a partnership between the University of York and the University of Bergen. And at the beginning, also the former one member of the University of Nairobi in Kenya, but also involved close collaboration with Makerere University in Uganda, and as the project went on, also the University of Ghana. In the latter stages, we hope that the collaboration will also expand to the universities of Cape Town and Pretoria in South Africa. So the purpose of this project was really to address a challenge that faces countries across the world. And health policymakers in countries right across the world need to decide how to allocate their budgets and use the limited capacity of the healthcare system to best meet the health needs of their populations. And they want to improve the health of the populations to the greatest extent possible within their given budgets and resources available. And this is a common challenge facing all countries across the world. But it's a particular challenge where resources are most limited. And this project focused on healthcare resource allocation in African settings, where budgets are particularly constrained and there are very high unmet healthcare needs in many cases. And it drew on two existing projects which were led by one universities. Firstly, the Tanzi Laonze project, which is a collaboration between the University of York, my centre, Makerere University, and Kamuzu University in Malawi. And also a somewhat similar project, which is a partnership across the University of Bergen and the University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. That was termed the Centres for Ethics and Priority Setting, or BCEPS and ACEPS, respectively in Bergen and in Addis. And these two projects shared similarities in that they sought to forge strong links between academic institutions and local policymakers, and also to build over the long term strengthened research capacity in the countries of interest. And this project, which was supported by one, aimed to draw together the lessons from these two existing projects, also to draw on experiences from other one members in designing and managing such projects, and to combine this with expertise on health policy in Africa and on research in environments. It's a very rich project, but one of the things we learned in particular is that public universities such as the One members can benefit from existing trust and social capital that exists between public universities and mandated health and public policymakers. There's something of the shared ethos which places concern for public good at its heart. Sometimes this is called a public civil service ethos in policymaking circles. Sometimes we talk about public good in academic circles. But ultimately, our types of institutions share the same larger objective to improve societal welfare, well-being, and public good in the countries in which we work and operate. And healthcare resource allocation is intrinsic, essential to improving public good in the area of health, to improve health, population health outcomes. And what we found in the project, that there's a real opportunity to combine three key pillars of activity, which together could support the environment and the evidence base to improve resource allocation in health, leading to improved health outcomes and reduced population health inequalities. These were firstly, perhaps most obviously, research, generation of research evidence, and particularly research which was relevant for resource allocation. Multidisciplinary research, which draws upon contributions from a number of disciplines, but with economics at its heart to guide the allocation of budgets, but also involving ethics, epidemiology, political science, and other disciplines which make vital synergistic contributions. But research alone is never enough. We found that to really set the environment for informing health policy, it needs to be combined with concerted effort at capability building of both analysts producing the research, particularly close to policymakers, but also of policymakers themselves to use, interpret, critique, and ultimately draw off research in appropriate ways when formulating their policies. And thirdly, it needed continuous effort and engagement to strengthen the interface of research and policymaking through research to policymaker partnerships, supporting stronger institutions and processes and continuous dialogues. And importantly, these three key areas of research, capability building, and policy partnership are mutually reinforcing. So production of relevant research can help to strengthen policy partnership between academics and policymakers. Capability building clearly contributes to research, but also can help in the uptake of policy. And that policy engagement, crucially, we found, really helps us to shape our research in ways which recognise the limits of our contributions to date and really provide us with new ideas to advance our research agendas. And One universities have a real opportunity to synergise across themselves and to work across these three domains. And as a result of this project, we have begun to do this particularly in respect of health economics teaching. So a number of One partners now are looking at coordinating their health economics teaching contributions to contribute to one another's programmes in terms of lectures, to contribute in external examination, and to enrich the environment for our own students and show the internationalisation of our programmes. We see similar things taking place in the areas of policy partnership and research, of course. And this stuff matters. It really leads to somewhere good in terms of enhancing population health and well-being. So in the three countries which were covered by this programme, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Malawi, all three have developed what are termed health benefits packages. These are lists of interventions which have large potential for improving population health at modest cost. And in all three countries, their long-term plans are now based around prioritising the delivery of cost-effective interventions. Now, this is really, really important. This has happened in Malawi for the last 10 years. And in that period, the country's experienced an increase in life expectancy of approximately 10 years. This has been attributed to prioritising maternal and child health care, some things which are not naturally priorities looking at the existing funding environments, but they receive greater priority through the use of health benefits packages in these cases. Working across these three domains through time, we believe, can reach useful ends. So the one-member universities have been working in this area for a number of years now. But recently, the health policy landscape has changed, giving us an even greater opportunity to have a positive influence on health policy and contributing to population health improvement. In 2019, the African heads of states came together to sign a resolution called the African Leaders Meetings Declaration, the ALM, Investing in Health. And in particularly for our purposes, it contributed to establishing regional hubs of expertise in health financing and health economics, and facilitating greater cooperation across ministries of health, finance, treasury, and finding a place for academic input into these. And in November last year in Malawi, the first national dialogue between ministries of finance and ministries of health with academic input was hosted. You can see the photo in the bottom left-hand corner. And then in March this year, there was a meeting convened in York, which explored how research and academic partners can best align behind the ALM declaration. This involved contributions from the universities of York, Bergen, Makerere, Pretoria, Cape Town, and University of Ghana as well. Also, so we believe this model has real value. It can be replicated also in other parts of the world where there are interests, and in fact, there's been interest from the Ministry of Health in Brazil in collaboration with the University of Minas Gerais, and also the Ministry of Health in Thailand in partnership with Mahidol University. So we believe that working together, drawing upon our strengths as a one network, making contributions in research and teaching, can really lead somewhere important, meaningful, and there's the opportunity for one to uniquely place itself as a network of universities with putting public good at its heart and the centre of our focus. So thank you for listening to the talk.
Thank you, Paul. I'm afraid we have no time for questions.
Thank you.
So our next report is on a major child health research initiative. This is a project led by Bukola Salami, who is professor in the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Alberta. And she has many partners at the University of Bristol, Lausanne, Maastricht, NCKU, Sheffield, Southampton, and York. Bukola, over to you.
Thank you. I'll be presenting today on the grant that we recently received, One Child, Every Child. The motivation for this project is based on Canada's current ranking on child health indicators as assessed by one. Canada currently ranks as 30th out of 38 high-income countries on child health indicators. The Canada Canada First Research Excellence Funds has provided $125.2 million over 7 years to tackle this child health inequity. And this has been matched to up to $300 million over 7 years. One Child, Every Child is Canada's first research, scholarship, and knowledge mobilization, a vision of transforming the lives of children and families so that all children living in Canada are the healthiest, most empowered, and thriving in the world. The project is led by the University of Calgary. The University of Alberta is the main major partner on the project, and there are over 130 partners, including the Worldwide Universities Network. Major focus of the project is on addressing child health inequities, and I lead the EDI component of the project. And for the equity, diversity, and inclusion component, we have 3 bold ideas. One of those bold ideas is intersectionality. Another bold idea is parallel path. And the third bold idea is inclusive governance. Some of the intersectional elements of the project builds on some of the ideas related to one research development fund on intersectionality in the context of COVID-19. And specifically, we held a workshop which was delivered by members from University of Sheffield, Maastricht University, and another partner member that is no longer one member anymore, to address and to come up with strategies to integrate intersectionality into research design. So here is a diagram of what this project aims to achieve. We have three thematic focus: precision health, better beginnings, and vulnerable to thriving, which focuses much more on mental health. There are about 6 cross-cutting accelerators, and one of those accelerators is equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that's the component that I lead. There's also Indigenous ways of knowing, so we'll be working parallel paths with Indigenous people of Canada, and transdisciplinary training, which will provide opportunity for cross exchange of trainees across the globe, comprehensive data, technology, and also impact knowledge and knowledge mobilization. We hope to achieve research excellence and breakthroughs to gain approaches to transform health outcomes for Indigenous people, to build strategies that benefit communities and society, to train the next generation of scholars, and also to have an EDI framework and action plan that will transform child health inequities across the globe. So some of the alignment with WON includes engagement of intersectional researchers across WON University. So we hope that by this project, through this project, that we will be able to engage intersectional researchers through the worldwide universities network. And the intersectional research approaches in this project will be led by Women and Children's Health Research Institute, which is located at the University of Alberta. And they'll be organizing some workshops and inviting some WON researchers and researchers across the globe to contribute to the workshop. This is not yet confirmed, but I'm still trying and get some funding through the project to hold a conference in Ghana in 2024. The project, the conference in Ghana is led by the WON-funded African Child and Youth Migration Network. And if we are successful to gain funding through this project, it will support researchers to attend and present at the conference. There will also be opportunities for student and faculty exchanges across the globe through this project to improve and address child health inequities. There'll be opportunities. I've also put in the proposal. So I'm putting a sub-proposal in for the larger grant, and I've put in the proposal the need to complete comparative research project that will address health inequities. Co-investigator or collaborators on this project, there'll be opportunities for WON members to be co-investigators and collaborators on the project. Workshop, for WON members to be workshop guest speakers. And many of the things I have mentioned here, I just submitted my budget for the equity, health equity, EDI sub-team accelerator. And so it's still pending acceptance and approval of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bukola. I'm afraid we have no time for questions. Excuse me. Our final report today is on managing the carbon footprint of academic air travel. At our AGM last year, Andreas Neef, who's Professor of Development Studies at the University of Auckland, described some preliminary work he'd undertaken to examine the carbon cost of academic travel. The Partnership Board, for obvious reasons, was very much engaged by this and asked Professor Neef to prepare a special report and make recommendations on how to achieve the appropriate balance between climate impact and getting academic work done. Today he'll tell us about that work virtually. He's in Auckland, and there will be time for questions after his talk. So thank you, Andreas. Over to you.
I'm very pleased to be with you this morning, although only virtually. I want to acknowledge that nothing beats in-person meetings, but I thought that I would have sent the wrong message if I had come over to Monterey for a 20-minute presentation on academic air travel reduction strategies and use up over a ton of CO2. Although I would have really loved to meet you all in person and experience Tec de Monterrey's wonderful campus. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, particularly Peter, Mike, and Arturo, for giving me such a prominent spot in the program. I really appreciate that. And I want to use the next 20 minutes or so to report on an academic air travel policy review that I conducted with a group of very enthusiastic students for our network. And I would like to start with a very brief background to this study. As we all know, frequent air travel has become very much a normalized aspect of our modern academic landscape. And the convenience of air travel, as we also know, comes with a high environmental burden. It's the most energy intensive form of mobility, and it will remain that for the foreseeable future. So we believe that as a highly mobile profession, academia has a responsibility to proactively engage in efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. And as Peter mentioned, the WN sponsored a study on academic air travel policies within their network, and this was co-funded by the University of Auckland through a summer research scholarship. A bit more about the background. It started all with a literature-based concept note that I wrote on academic air travel to inform the University of Auckland's sustainability strategy. And as Peter mentioned, I presented the idea for a WN-wide air travel policy review at last year's AGM in Lausanne. I then last semester assigned 72 third-year undergraduate students in my course Governing Planet Earth to choose one WN member. We built small teams. This was a group assignment, and they then looked at the sustainability strategies of all those 24 members, including a few non-WN members, and they had to summarize their findings in a short report. And then we built a 4-member research team that synthesized the information, and we came up with a full report of about 48 pages and an executive summary of 18 pages. First of all, we identified some key tensions, internationalization versus sustainability. So I think one major issue is that heightened competition in the international higher education sector leads individual universities to promote internationalization as a growth-led strategic imperative. We found that 20 out of our 24 members mentioned a commitment to internationalization in their mission or purpose statements, but only 5 members included references to sustainability, and only 2 WN members included overseas students air travel, inbound overseas students air travel in their carbon emissions accounting. And that's quite problematic because particular countries in the global north, the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, account for a large share of global international students. We found that nearly all WN members have published an identifiable sustainability policy. 17 out of 24 members have announced emissions reduction targets, with 15 of those committed to achieving either carbon neutrality or carbon zero in the next 10 to 30 years. But only 9 members actually include air travel in their carbon neutrality net zero goal. Another key tension that we found is who actually gets to fly. And the key justification for our academic air travel is often it's crucial for our career advancement. However, evidence suggests that the most frequent academic flyers mostly are already well established within their given field. On the other hand, the most disadvantaged colleagues are early career researchers, female academics with caring responsibilities, and academics in the global south for a number of reasons, including the legacies of colonialism. So the distribution of academic air travel is highly skewed towards a relatively small number of academics that are responsible, for example, for a very high amount of conference air travel, which is still the largest share of academic air travel, much higher than, for example, for fieldwork. So we looked at several initiatives among our members and also beyond WN. We looked at best practices and we came up with 5 categories: e-conferencing, measurement and monitoring, switching to other modes of transport, carbon offsetting, and cultural change. And being conscious of the time, I just want to pick 3 of those: e-conferencing, mode switching, and cultural change, and provide you with a few examples, very selective, of course. First initiative, e-conferencing. Among the 24 member universities, just over half mentioned encouraging or enabling a shift to e-conferencing to reduce academic air travel, which is surprisingly low. I would have expected a higher proportion of member universities to encourage or enable e-conferencing. One example is the University of Ghana's international travel policy. It encourages staff to take advantage of the enhanced ICT infrastructure on the campus and use video teleconferencing wherever possible. Tec de Monterrey launched a communications campaign, Mis Viajes, to reduce business travel by promoting the use of technological applications to enable colleagues to attend meetings virtually. And the University of Alberta started a Moving Ideas Without Moving People campaign to promote e-conferencing because of the responsibility to the climate, but also they said it's about pushing the conference format forward to produce stronger scholarly results. And we find out that virtualization maybe is becoming a mode of substituting academic travel, particularly for conferences. The second category of initiatives is mode switching, and we found that Maastricht University has a really interesting campaign, Take the Green Seat. It encourages academic travelers to make low carbon travel choices, utilizing a decision tree process. The system then directs travelers toward third-party online tools so they can calculate their own carbon footprint of their intended journey by rail or air. This then translates into a calculation of the offset contribution that academics have to contribute to Maastricht University's internal mitigation fund. And I emphasize this, it's really important to have those internal mitigation funds rather than relying on external offset schemes. And that internal mitigation fund is then used primarily for the development of more sustainable travel options at the university. So really interesting model, I think, that we can learn from. Beyond the WN, there was one example from Edinburgh University that combined mode switching with offsetting too. They developed a local, national, and international travel hierarchy, and they combined those 3 levels of hierarchies with a long-term commitment to capture and store its unavoidable carbon emissions. And they do this through restoring peatlands and expanding forests in Scotland, which provides apparently very good opportunities of engagement of staff and students in developing those carbon offsetting schemes. The final type of initiatives that I would like to mention is culture change. How do we move from an academic fly-out culture to a low-carbon community of climate-conscious academic travelers? And I think the University of Bergen's approach is really an interesting model. It focuses on making carbon emissions from air travel transparent through annual reporting that is publicly available. It helps academics to self-evaluate their travel choices through simple and self-guided tools. And it moves then incrementally from a focus on awareness raising to greater accountability among academics. I also believe academic role models are really crucial for effecting this cultural change. And I want to mention that in 2018, one of our university's top scientists and previously hypermobile academics, Professor Sean Handy, who then became a household name in COVID-19 modeling 2 years later, he made a conscious decision of not flying for one entire year. He cut his CO2 emissions to just over 1 ton, which was a reduction of 95% from his travel carbon footprint in 2017, which just gives you an idea how often he used the plane in 2017. He wrote a book about it, #NoFly, and he had numerous media appearances about this decision. Just one last week at Aotea Center in Auckland. And he also convinced fellow academics to make the same voluntary commitment. An interesting example beyond WN is culture change through taking a participatory and deliberative approach. This is done by the University of Melbourne. They are addressing academic hypermobility by trialing an online platform, Polis, that enables a form of digital democracy for discussing such contentious issues as academic air travel reduction. They use various qualitative, quantitative, and participatory methodologies. They use quite sophisticated technology, and they try to encourage wider engagement, unravel tensions, and try to discover consensus-based solutions to such complex and paradoxical issues as academic air travel. And we believe that this type of approach is really critical for developing long-term equitable policy responses. So that brings me to our 3 sets of recommendation. Recommendation 1 is we need deep deliberation at the university levels. We need to, I believe, employ a participatory approach to air travel reduction, because the distribution of costs and benefits of reduced academic air travel requires very skillful balancing of diverse needs and opportunities. And ideally, we achieve this through the co-creation of solutions by those that are traveling or likely to travel. And the approaches should be layered and iterative. Policies and strategic plans should regularly integrate new knowledge and outcomes of those deliberative processes. And then institutions can proactively identify what travel is actually justifiable and why is that the case. Strategic plans should determine how best to support necessary and well-justified travel, and then maximize the outputs that accrue from it across individual, institutional, and broader societal levels. The second recommendation is we need collective action. There are certainly limits to what individual institutions can achieve in terms of reduced academic air travel, because the capacity and autonomy of individual institutions is often inhibited by the actions of meta-institutions, funding agencies that roll out mobility funds and encourage international travel, academic networks, professional associations, governments. And we believe there is potential for WUN to play a major part in changing the culture of flying within the sector. And we identified 3 key roles that we can have as a global network, which is supporting sector level research into the contribution that flying makes to research outputs. We can develop and test new models for collaborative academic research that minimizes air travel. And we can bring together, hopefully, universities and ranking organizations to develop new institutional performance metrics, where internationalization might play a somewhat lesser role and sustainability is playing a much more prominent role. The final recommendation, knowledge production, and that brings me to a WN research agenda that we would like to propose on academic air travel. Research supported by WN could contribute to better understand the current distribution of academic air travel, the reasons for it, and the barriers to avoiding it. And we need to also understand how academic air travel contributes to institutional goals, to research outcomes for disciplines and individual researchers, and how academic air travel contributes to individual development objectives. And this research should explicitly include and examine the various values, norms, and contextual characteristics that contribute to decision-making around academic air travel in order to produce socially robust knowledge that can then inform strategic planning processes that are accepted by the majority of our colleagues. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to acknowledge a few people that were really instrumental for conducting this short review, our research team, students in our Governing Planet Earth class, Peter and Mike for commissioning this policy review, and Dawn and Eric for their encouragement and support. Ngamihi, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. And let's not miss the opportunity for taking action. We don't have any time left, as the website of our annual general meeting tells us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. We have time for questions, so please, questions from the audience. Can you
just a comment. As a university organization, why aren't we more focused on promoting green flying instead of less flying? Because there is plenty of research on renewable fuels for aviation, and the universities should help to boost this. There's no way back. We are all very glad to be here. We all flew to be here. How can we get back instead of just make aviation greener?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. I believe we all still need to fly, and I don't want to advocate for kind of a no-fly policy among academics. But I think we all should fly less because the technologies are still not there. I mean, airlines promise that there is sustainable aviation fuel available, and there are, of course, lots of trials to, for example, have better batteries that ultimately will be so light that they can fit into airplanes. But I think for the foreseeable future, at least for the next 10, 15 years, and that's actually according to the IPCC, that's the window that we have, some action is required. And we are part of a very small international hydromobile elite, and I think students and society is also looking at academics to do their share. So just coming back to the small book that my colleague wrote, basically his final words are, fly if you must, offset if you can, but definitely fly less. But connecting to your question, I think it's really important that we as universities also contribute to research into sustainable aviation. But I just think it's too far away. We need to act now.
Thank you. Rodolfo?
One of the dimensions that perhaps you can take in consideration is the emissions from the internet services. The Wi-Fi is consuming energy. In many countries, of course, energy is a low carbon energy or electricity. So there must be a life cycle balance of the academic life on place that we can figure out what is the real carbon footprint, because yes, the airplane company can mitigate their carbon emissions through offsets, but what happened if you increase the use of internet services with big data, and I think that we need some numbers on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's video conferencing is not entirely carbon neutral, but it has a much lower carbon footprint than fossil fuel-based aviation. That's for sure. And as you mentioned, many countries have a very high share of renewable energy in their electricity production. New Zealand, for example, has a share of renewable energies of more than 80%. So if we organize video conferences here in New Zealand, for example, which is a very isolated place, as you know, it really helps us get down our carbon emissions from our academic activities. But as you rightly say, we need more research. We need to kind of look at the whole life cycle of academics. We need to look at what is the contribution of conference travel to academic outputs, and can we substitute a large share of in-person conferences through hybrid models that are also more equitable, because colleagues that, as I mentioned earlier, female colleagues that sometimes cannot travel due to caring responsibilities can also participate in those. And I find it quite problematic that after COVID-19 now we are kind of going back to business as usual, and I find it harder to get conference organizers to offer a hybrid model for the delivery of the conference.
Thank you. Andreas, I have a question related to one of your recommendations. You noted that one of the things we ought to be trying to do is manage research collaborations without so much travel in them. COVID obviously triggered the need for this, and there were lots of clever things people started thinking about to do with data sharing and the like. Can you say a little bit about how advanced this is now, and how large the opportunities look?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think our own WN research development project was greatly affected by COVID-19. We started in early 2020, had planned an in-person meeting in Thailand, and then COVID came along, and we had a very large consortium with colleagues from 12 universities involved. And we couldn't meet in person, so we did everything virtually. We had very good meetings. We planned a special issue together, which is now being published. We prepared an edited book collection, which is forthcoming in 2024. And we gathered great ideas for future research collaborations. So COVID actually told us that it is possible to reduce air travel. And for me personally, the pandemic was one of the most productive times for writing, because I didn't have to travel that much, and found more time for writing articles, in fact. So And that's just my personal experience, but I acknowledge that there are different experiences. For many, COVID-19 was very disruptive to their academic careers, and they were looking forward to getting again on a plane and build their international networks. And I continue to believe that we particularly need to support our early career researchers. But why do we need to support senior academics that already have an established international network to fly more, and often fly 10 times more than junior academics? So I think we just have to make that more conscious decision, and we need to encourage our colleagues to be more conscious in their decision-making processes around academic travel.
Thank you. Martin.
No, thank you. Coming back to that last point, I mean, in a logic way, to support then young researchers to fly, won't we get them addicted in the same way? Wouldn't it not be better to have an overall system that you can really, that doesn't count anymore, and we find alternative ways? Because I'm afraid as they move on in their career, then they get into the same mode.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I believe there's some truth to what you're saying, but if we have that kind of level of deliberation that I mentioned in the second recommendation, that we really bring everyone on board and discuss those issues openly. We discuss those issues in research committees. For example, in our university, we now, before we allocate any internal funding, each of the applicants each of the applicants has to provide a comment on its sustainability strategy. So that is really helping us to get a better sense of why someone needs to travel. And if we make everyone think carefully about travel choices, I think we can get to that level where we have a community of climate conscious travelers, and not make early career researchers as addicted to flying as senior academics. That makes sense.
Thank you. Ralph?
Very interesting, thought-provoking presentation. Thank you. I'm aware that for every complex problem, there's a simple solution, and it's wrong. But it sounds like we're going to have to make decisions about this before we have robust data to tell us what the fine-tuning of meeting scheduling ought to be. I wonder if something as simple-minded as saying organizations that have been having annual in-person meetings should just do them every other year in person and alternate with an online kind of approach. It seems like we made it through 2+ years of COVID with very few in-person meetings, and we're still being reasonably productive. Maybe that's a way to start.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic idea, and I think it reflects the thinking among some associations that they are now proposing maybe not having those annual meetings in person, but really alternating between an e-conference and an in-person annual meeting, or making all meetings hybrid. There's also ideas around regional hubs where you start an annual conference of a global association in Australia, New Zealand, and then you move around the globe and you hand over from one kind of continent to the other, from one time zone to the other. They are actually quite creative ways of doing it, and I really appreciate your feedback and your ideas. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? In which case, thank you very much, Andreas. I should point out I should draw your attention to the fact that the full report of the project is available on the WN website, and the executive summary, which Andreas just prepared recently, will also be available very soon. So thank you all. Mike has got some housekeeping arrangements to tell us about.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everyone. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes for what's coming next the rest of the day. So just after we break from here, we're going to go outside the same way we came in, down the stairs. And in the front of the beautiful Rectorate building here, they've set up a little small stage for us to take our group photo. So we'll go there together. The team, so if you see people around the room in blue shirts, dark blue and light blue shirts, they'll be available all throughout the AGM to help not just lead us to where we need to go next, but also if you have run into any trouble or have any questions, so just let them know. But they'll lead us out in a minute. Just to kind of set it up in advance so that goes as smoothly as possible, of course, when we're coming together onto the stage to make it life easier for our photographer, taller people in the back, shorter people in the front. We'll take a group photo, and then after that, your reward will be we're going to walk through Tech's beautiful campus to our lunch location. And then after that, we'll reconvene in our governance group meetings. So the partnership board is here. The academic advisory group is in a room called La Carreta, which we'll pass along the way to lunch. And then the coordinators will actually be in this meeting as well, in a meeting room downstairs. We need to be back in those places by 2 o'clock today, because we have some virtual presentations and in-person presentations planned for each group. So make sure that when we're moving back that you're not too distracted by the beautiful campus or the deer or the peacocks here on campus. And we'll take our place again by 2. Then at 4:45 p.m. this afternoon, we will board the buses to go back to the hotel where you can freshen up a little bit before the buses depart at 6:20 p.m. for your governance group working dinners. Just a couple of other things to flag really quickly. Tomorrow morning, the bus leaves a little bit earlier at 7:45 a.m., so it'll leave at 7:45 sharp, so please leave a couple of extra minutes because the elevators are a little bit slow. You might have discovered at the hotel this morning. And a quick note on our program for Wednesday. We have a really great President's Forum planned. And so I know that people that are leaving that day they're going to have their airport, the airport on their minds. So just to let you know, please do stay through the whole program if you can. We'll have transportation direct from here to the airport if you need it. Shuttles will leave right at the end. But if you do need to leave earlier and you need to schedule a taxi, let us know and we can help you sort that out. But if you can stay, please do stay through all 3 sessions because I think it's going to be good. Great, thanks. So we'll just all head out together now. Thank you.